The crystal champagne flute trembled in my father's manicured hand as he stood at the head of our mahogany dining table, his face flushed with pride and expensive wine. The candlelight from my mother's elaborate centerpiece danced across the faces of our gathered family, cousins, aunts, uncles, and grandparents, all here to celebrate Sophia's 25th birthday. My sister sat radiant in her emerald silk dress, her perfect blonde hair catching the light like spun gold, accepting congratulations on her recent promotion to senior associate at the city's most prestigious law firm. Before we enjoy Margaret's incredible dinner, my father announced, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being heard, I want to say something about our beautiful Sophia. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the one that had accompanied every family gathering for as long as I could remember, the feeling of being invisible while sitting right there at the table. Sophia has always been everything we could have asked for in a daughter, my father continued, his eyes shining with genuine adoration. Valedictorian, Harvard Law Review, now the youngest senior associate in Whitmore and Associates history. She's accomplished, beautiful, and represents everything the Harrison family stands for. My mother rose from her seat, her own champagne glass raised high. To our daughter, she said, her voice thick with emotion, our pride and joy, our only real daughter, only real daughter. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs and making the elegant dining room spin around me. 23 years old, and I was still nothing more than an afterthought to the people who had raised me. The daughter who wasn't quite good enough, wasn't quite right, wasn't quite real enough to deserve their genuine love and recognition. Around the table, glasses clinked in agreement. Sophia beamed, accepting the praise as her due, while I sat frozen in my chair, watching my parents toast the daughter who mattered while the daughter who didn't sat 3 feet away. But as the burning in my chest intensified, something else rose up to meet it, a cold, crystalline clarity that cut through years of swallowed hurt and forced smiles, because I knew something about our perfect Sophia that would shatter their champagne-fueled celebration into 1,000 pieces, something I had been carrying alone for 3 years, protecting this family from a truth that would destroy their carefully constructed image of perfection. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. Everyone was looking at Sophia, waiting for her gracious response to their tribute. No one was looking at me. Perfect. I stood up slowly, my own untouched champagne glass in my hand. The scrape of my chair against the hardwood floor was unnaturally loud in the expectant quiet. I'd like to add something to that toast, I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. My father looked surprised but pleased. Of course, Avery. What would you like to say about your sister? What would I like to say about my sister? Where should I begin? Should I tell them about the DUI she'd covered up with Daddy's money and connections? The cocaine habit she'd hidden behind her perfect grades and flawless image? The hit-and-run accident 3 years ago that left a 12-year-old boy in a wheelchair, while Sophia walked away without a scratch or a backward glance? I'd like to say, I began, looking around the table at all these people who had spent my entire life comparing me unfavorably to Sophia Harrison, the golden daughter who could do no wrong, that sometimes the person we think we know best is actually a complete stranger. Sophia's smile faltered slightly, and I saw something flicker in her green eyes that might have been fear. Avery, my mother said carefully, this is Sophia's birthday celebration. Perhaps we could— Oh, but Mother, I interrupted, my voice gaining strength with each word. I think everyone should know exactly what kind of woman we're celebrating tonight, especially since you've made it clear that she's your only real daughter. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sophia had gone very still, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. 3 years ago, I continued, looking directly at my sister. On the night of March 15th, Sophia was driving home from a party. She'd been drinking, of course, and her judgment was impaired. She hit a child, a 12-year-old boy named Tommy Martinez, who was riding his bike home from his friend's house. The collective gasp from our family was audible. Sophia's face had turned the color of fresh snow. Instead of stopping to help him, instead of calling 911, instead of doing what any decent human being would do, she drove away. She left that little boy bleeding on the pavement and went home to bed. That's impossible, my father whispered, his champagne glass forgotten in his hand. Sophia would never— Tommy Martinez is paralyzed from the waist down, I said, my voice cutting through his denial like a blade. He'll never walk again. His family has been struggling with medical bills and therapy costs, while our perfect daughter has been building her perfect career, accepting your perfect praise, and letting everyone believe she's your perfect child. The silence that followed was indeed deafening. 20 people staring at Sophia, who sat frozen like a beautiful statue, unable to deny what I had just revealed because we both knew I had proof. "Happy birthday, sister," I said quietly, setting down my champagne glass with a soft clink that sounded like a gavel falling. "I hope it was everything you dreamed it would be." Growing up as Sophia Harrison's younger sister was like living in the shadow of a supernova, everything bright and brilliant and overwhelming, leaving me invisible in the darkness that surrounded her light. From the moment I was old enough to understand family dynamics, I knew I was the consolation prize, the child my parents kept hoping would somehow transform into another version of their perfect firstborn. Sophia walked at 10 months. I walked at 14 months, which my mother marked in my baby book with visible disappointment. Sophia potty trained herself before her second birthday. I struggled with accidents until I was almost 4. Each incident met with sighs and unfavorable comparisons to my sister's early achievement. "Sophia was already reading chapter books at your age," my mother would say when I brought home my kindergarten primers. "Perhaps you need to try harder, sweetheart." Try harder, the phrase that defined my childhood. While Sophia glided effortlessly through dance recitals, piano lessons, and academic achievements, I struggled to keep up with her shadow, always falling short of expectations I had never set for myself. The differences weren't just in our abilities, they were in how our parents responded to everything we did. When Sophia brought home straight A's, there were celebrations, special dinners, and proud phone calls to relatives. When I brought home A's and B's, there were gentle suggestions about how I might improve my study habits to achieve Sophia's level of excellence. When Sophia won the lead in the school play, our parents attended every performance, brought flowers, and took professional photographs. When I made the varsity soccer team as a sophomore, something that required athleticism and teamwork skills Sophia had never possessed, the achievement was acknowledged with a brief, "That's nice, honey," before the conversation returned to Sophia's latest academic honor. "It's not that we don't love you," my mother once told me when I was 13, and had tearfully asked why nothing I did seemed to matter as much as Sophia's accomplishments. "It's just that Sophia has such special gifts. She's going to do important things with her life." The implication was clear. I was not going to do important things with my life. I was ordinary, unremarkable, the child who existed to make their extraordinary daughter look even more extraordinary by comparison. The worst part was that Sophia seemed genuinely oblivious to the favoritism. She accepted our parents' adoration as her natural due, never questioning why I received lukewarm acknowledgement for achievements that would have been celebrated if they had been hers. She was kind to me, in the absent way that saints are kind to peasants, benevolent but distant, secure in her superiority. "You're so lucky to have Sophia as a role model," teachers would tell me throughout school. "She set such a high standard for academic excellence." Lucky. As if watching everyone you care about love someone else more than they could ever love you was some kind of gift. By high school, I had learned to lower my expectations. I stopped trying to compete with Sophia's achievements and focused instead on finding my own path. I volunteered at animal shelters, worked part-time jobs, and developed practical skills that my parents dismissed as nice hobbies while they celebrated Sophia's acceptance to Harvard. "We're so proud," my father announced at my high school graduation dinner. "Sophia graduated summa cum laude from Harvard, and now she's been accepted to Harvard Law School. The Harrison family legacy continues." I had graduated with a 3.8 GPA and been accepted to 3 excellent state universities with partial scholarships. But my achievements were mentioned only as an afterthought, a brief acknowledgement before the conversation returned to Sophia's superior accomplishments. The pattern continued through college. While I worked multiple jobs to pay for my education and living expenses, Sophia's every need was covered by our parents' generous financial support. While I struggled to afford textbooks, Sophia enjoyed spring break trips to Europe, funded by parents who believed her success justified any expense. "Investment in excellence," my father called it when I questioned the disparity in their financial support. "Sophia's going to be a lawyer. Her future earning potential justifies our investment." I was studying social work, a field my parents considered noble but financially impractical. The fact that I had chosen a career dedicated to helping vulnerable people seemed less important to them than Sophia's choice to pursue corporate law, where she could maximize her income and social status. The night I graduated from college, with honors, having made Dean's List every semester despite working 25 hours a week, my parents threw a small party at our house. Sophia had finished her first year of law school with perfect grades, and most of the evening was spent discussing her summer internship at a prestigious Boston firm. "We have such accomplished daughters," my aunt commented during the party. "Well, Sophia is truly exceptional," my mother replied automatically. "Avery is finding her way, finding my way." At 22, having just graduated with honors from a respected university, I was still finding my way, while Sophia, who had never worked a day in her life or faced a single real challenge, was considered the accomplished one. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I finally understood that no matter what I achieved, no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I contributed to the world, I would always be the daughter who wasn't quite enough. I just hadn't realized yet that being overlooked would eventually become my greatest advantage. Sophia's perfection was a masterpiece of careful curation, polished to such a high shine that it blinded everyone who looked at her, including, most of the time, herself. She had learned early that being exceptional was her birthright and her burden, and she had spent her entire life living up to an image that demanded nothing less than flawless execution in every aspect of her existence. Her morning routine was a symphony of self-improvement. Up at 5:30 a.m. for a carefully planned workout, followed by a skincare regimen that involved products costing more than most people's monthly grocery budget. Her closet was organized by color and season, filled with designer pieces that projected success and sophistication. Even her breakfast was Instagram perfect. Artfully arranged fruit and Greek yogurt that she would photograph before eating exactly half of it. "Discipline is the foundation of excellence," she would tell me whenever I commented on her rigid schedule. "Success doesn't happen by accident, Avery." And truly, Sophia's success appeared to be the result of unwavering discipline and natural talent. Harvard undergraduate degree, summa cum laude, Harvard Law School, law review editor, summer internships at white shoe firms that recruited only the most prestigious students, job offers from every major firm in Boston, New York, and Washington, D.C. Our parents displayed her achievements like trophies in a case, framed diplomas, newspaper clippings about her academic honors, photographs from law school graduation where she stood between them looking like the perfect embodiment of their dreams for their perfect daughter. "Sophia represents the best of what this family can achieve," my father would tell anyone who would listen. "She's proof that with the right guidance and values, excellence is inevitable." What our father didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Sophia's excellence was maintained through a complex system of shortcuts, payoffs, and increasingly dangerous coping mechanisms that she had become expert at hiding behind her flawless facade. I first suspected something was wrong during her junior year at Harvard, when she came home for Christmas break, and I found her in the bathroom at 3 a.m., shaking and sweating despite the house's warmth. She claimed she had food poisoning, but I had seen enough movies and heard enough stories to recognize the signs of withdrawal. "Are you using something?" I asked her directly, corner her in her childhood bedroom the next morning. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, but her hands were still trembling slightly as she applied her makeup with her usual precision. "I'm just stressed about exams. Law school is incredibly demanding." Stressed about exams she had already taken and aced, according to our parents' latest bragging session. Over the next 2 years, I began noticing other things. The way she would disappear into the bathroom for extended periods during family gatherings, emerging with dilated pupils and sudden bursts of energy. The expensive clothing and accessories that seemed beyond the reach of even our parents' generous allowance. The phone calls she would take in private, speaking in low, urgent tones to people she never identified. "Business connections," she would explain when I asked about the mysterious calls. "Networking is essential in law school." But networking didn't usually happen at 1 a.m., and business connections didn't usually require meetings in parking lots and cash payments that I accidentally witnessed when I borrowed her car one afternoon. The cocaine habit explained so much that I had previously attributed to Sophia's natural discipline and energy. The perfectly organized apartment that she could clean obsessively for hours. The ability to study for 18 hours straight during finals week. The rapid weight loss that everyone complimented as law school discipline. The periods of manic productivity followed by crashes that she hid from everyone by scheduling them during school breaks when she could retreat to her apartment. "You look thin," my mother would comment with approval during Sophia's visits home. "Law school is clearly keeping you in excellent shape." Excellent shape. Our perfect daughter was slowly destroying herself with stimulants, but because she maintained her academic performance and physical appearance, no one bothered to look beneath the surface. I tried to talk to her about it once. during her final year of law school when her behavior had become so erratic that I was genuinely frightened for her safety. "Sophia, you need help," I said, finding her in our parents' kitchen at 2 a.m., compulsively reorganizing the spice cabinet with manic intensity. "I need to finish law school," she replied, without looking at me, her movements sharp and precise. "I need to graduate first in my class. I need to get the job at Whitmore and Associates. I need to be everything they expect me to be." "Who is they?" I asked gently. She finally looked at me then, and for just a moment, I saw something raw and desperate in her eyes that had nothing to do with drugs and everything to do with the crushing weight of being perfect for 25 years straight. "Everyone," she whispered. "Everyone expects me to be perfect, Avery. If I'm not perfect, then what am I?" That was the closest she ever came to acknowledging that her perfection was a performance, a carefully maintained illusion that required increasingly dangerous fuel to sustain. But she never admitted to the hit and run. That secret I discovered entirely by accident, and it changed everything I thought I knew about the sister I had spent my life envying. The accident that would destroy Sophia's carefully constructed perfect life began with my own moment of mundane responsibility, returning her car after borrowing it to move my friend Sarah's couch. I had found Sophia's key fob in my purse 3 days after helping Sarah relocate to her new apartment, and knowing my sister's obsessive need for order, I drove to her downtown apartment to return it before she realized it was missing. Sophia wasn't home, which wasn't unusual given her demanding schedule at Whitmore and Associates, but I knew where she kept her spare key, the same hiding place she'd used since high school, inside the fake rock in her window box. I was planning to leave the car key on her kitchen counter with a note explaining the borrowed car, but as I inserted her apartment key into the lock, I heard her voice inside. "I can't keep doing this," she was saying, her voice thick with tears. "It's been 3 years, and I can't sleep. I can't concentrate. I froze in the hallway, my hand still on the doorknob, uncertain whether I should enter or leave. Sophia sounded more distressed than I had ever heard her, even during the worst of her drug-fueled anxiety attacks. "You don't understand," she continued, presumably speaking to someone on the phone. I close my eyes and I see his face, that little boy, the way he looked when he hit the windshield, the sound his bike made when it got caught under the car. My blood turned to ice. Little boy, bike, windshield. "No, I can't go to the police now," Sophia was saying, her voice rising with panic. "It's been 3 years. They'll say I was covering it up, that I was a coward, that I let him suffer while I built my career. It'll destroy everything I've worked for." I stood in that hallway for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, listening to my perfect sister confess to something that made all her academic achievements and professional success meaningless. She had hit a child with her car and driven away. She had left him bleeding and broken while she came home to our parents' house and accepted their praise for her latest law school accomplishment. "I know his name," she whispered into the phone. "Tommy Martinez, 12 years old. He's in a wheelchair now, paralyzed from the waist down. His family has a GoFundMe page to help with medical expenses. Tommy Martinez." I memorized the name, knowing I would never be able to forget it. "The cocaine helps me forget for a while," Sophia continued. "But when it wears off, it's worse. Everything is worse. I don't know how much longer I can pretend to be the person everyone thinks I am." I backed away from the door as quietly as possible, leaving her car key on the hallway carpet outside her apartment. I couldn't face her. I couldn't look at the sister I had envied my entire life and pretend I didn't know what she had done. The drive home was a blur of shock and disbelief. By the time I reached our parents' house, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn off the engine. I sat in the driveway, staring at the house where Sophia's academic achievements covered the walls, trying to reconcile the golden daughter everyone celebrated with the woman who had confessed to a hit and run that had destroyed a child's life. That night, I researched Tommy Martinez online. The news articles from 3 years ago were brief. A 12-year-old boy had been struck by a hit-and-run driver while riding his bike home from a friend's house. He had sustained severe spinal injuries and had been in critical condition for weeks. The driver was never found. Tommy's family had indeed started a GoFundMe campaign to help with his ongoing medical expenses and therapy costs. His mother had written heartbreaking updates about his progress, his struggles with depression, his determination to learn wheelchair basketball despite everything he had lost. I found photos of Tommy before the accident, a bright, athletic boy who loved soccer and wanted to be a veterinarian when he grew up. The more recent photos showed a young man with sad eyes and a brave smile, participating in wheelchair athletics, and advocating for other disabled children. While Tommy Martinez was fighting to rebuild his life, Sophia was being celebrated for her achievements and planning her rise through the ranks of corporate law. While his family struggled with medical bills and insurance battles, our parents were proudly funding Sophia's designer wardrobe and expensive apartment. The injustice of it was overwhelming, but what shattered me completely was realizing that I was the only one who knew the truth. I was the only one who understood that our family's pride and joy was built on the foundation of a child's broken spine and a family's ongoing suffering. For 3 years, I carried that knowledge alone, watching our parents toast Sophia's successes, while Tommy Martinez learned to navigate a world that had become infinitely more difficult because of their perfect daughter's cowardice. Until the night they called her their only real daughter, and I decided that some truths are too important to keep buried. For 3 years after discovering Sophia's secret, I became someone I didn't recognize, a guardian of a family's ignorance, a protector of an illusion that I knew was destroying us all. Every family gathering became a performance where I watched our parents praise the daughter who had left a child paralyzed, while I smiled and nodded and kept the truth locked inside my chest, like a time bomb counting down to an inevitable explosion. The weight of knowledge changed everything about how I moved through the world. I found myself researching Tommy Martinez obsessively, following his recovery, his setbacks, his small victories. I knew when he was hospitalized with complications from his injuries. I knew when his father lost his job because he couldn't work full-time while caring for his son. I knew when Tommy started having panic attacks and needed therapy to deal with the trauma of the accident. I became an anonymous donor to his family's GoFundMe campaign, contributing money I could barely afford from my social worker salary. It felt like the least I could do, knowing that my family was indirectly responsible for their suffering. Every $100 I sent was a drop in the ocean compared to what Tommy needed, but it was something. It was acknowledgement that his pain mattered, even if I couldn't give him the justice he deserved. The hardest part was watching Sophia succeed while Tommy struggled. Every time our parents celebrated another of her professional achievements, I thought about a 12-year-old boy who would never walk again, because their perfect daughter had been too much of a coward to face the consequences of her actions. Sophia made partner track at 25. My father announced proudly during our monthly family dinner 6 months ago. Youngest associate in the firm's history to be considered for partnership. Partnership. Built on a foundation of lies and the destruction of an innocent child's life. I excused myself from dinner and threw up in the bathroom, overwhelmed by the cognitive dissonance of celebrating someone whose success was enabled by her ability to compartmentalize an unforgivable act. But I kept the secret because I understood what revealing it would do to our family. My parents had built their entire identity around having produced a daughter who represented their values, their success, their legacy. Learning that their golden child was a hit-and-run driver who had destroyed a family and never looked back would shatter them completely. More selfishly, I kept the secret because I knew that revealing it would make me the messenger who destroyed our family's happiness. I would become the daughter who had brought down the sister everyone loved, the one who had chosen to hurt people rather than protect them. The good daughter would become the destroyer, and the perfect daughter would become the victim of her sister's vindictiveness. "You're different lately," my mother commented one evening, when I was particularly quiet during dinner. "More distant. Is everything all right with work?" Work. My job as a social worker brought me into contact with families destroyed by trauma, children whose lives had been altered by other people's poor decisions, parents struggling to provide care for disabled children. Every case reminded me of Tommy Martinez and his family. Every success story made me think about the recovery he might have achieved if he had received immediate medical attention, instead of being left on the pavement to suffer alone. "Just tired," I would tell my mother, because how could I explain that I was exhausted from carrying the weight of everyone else's willful ignorance? I watched Sophia carefully during family gatherings, looking for signs that the guilt was affecting her. Sometimes I caught glimpses of the woman I had overheard on the phone that day, moments when her perfect composure would slip, and something raw and haunted would flicker across her features. But mostly, she seemed to have successfully compartmentalized what she had done, allowing herself to enjoy the success and praise that came with being our family's perfect daughter. "Sophia looks wonderful," my grandmother would say. "So accomplished and put together. You girls are so lucky to have parents who raised you with such strong values." Strong values. I wanted to laugh at the irony, but mostly I wanted to scream. The breaking point came gradually, building over months of watching Sophia accept praise and recognition, while Tommy Martinez posted updates about his ongoing medical struggles. The final straw was a newspaper article about Sophia winning a pro bono award for her volunteer work with underprivileged children. Underprivileged children. The perfect daughter was being celebrated for helping vulnerable kids while an actual child she had personally victimized continued to suffer in silence. That night, I made a decision. I was done protecting everyone from the truth. I was done watching injustice masquerade as success. I was done being the silent keeper of secrets that were slowly poisoning our family from within. 3 weeks later, at Sophia's 25th birthday party, when my parents raised their glasses and toasted their only real daughter, I realized that my time as the family's secret keeper was over. Some truths demand to be spoken, regardless of the consequences. The weeks leading up to Sophia's 25th birthday party were a masterclass in family dysfunction, disguised as celebration planning. My mother threw herself into organizing what she called a milestone celebration for our accomplished daughter, while I watched from the sidelines, knowing that we were essentially throwing a party to honor someone whose greatest achievement was getting away with destroying a child's life. "I want everything to be perfect," my mother told me as we addressed invitations in her immaculate kitchen. "Sophia has worked so hard to get where she is. She deserves to be celebrated." Deserves. The word stuck in my throat like a fishbone. What did any of us deserve? Did Tommy Martinez deserve to spend his 15th birthday in a wheelchair? Did his parents deserve to watch their athletic, dreams-filled son struggle with depression and chronic pain? Did I deserve to carry the weight of my sister's cowardice while watching everyone praise her courage and character? "The guest list is up to 30 people," my mother continued, consulting the leather-bound planner that organized her perfectly controlled life. "All the relatives, plus some of Sophia's colleagues from the firm. David wants to give a speech about family legacy and achievement. Family legacy. Our legacy was apparently leaving children bleeding in the street while we celebrated our moral superiority at dinner parties. I had been experiencing panic attacks for weeks, triggered by the cognitive dissonance of participating in the planning of a celebration for someone I could barely look at anymore. Every discussion of menu choices and flower arrangements felt like preparation for a funeral. The death of whatever remained of my ability to pretend our family was anything other than a lie wrapped in expensive clothing and good manners. "Avery, you seem distracted," my mother observed as I mechanically folded another invitation. "Is everything all right? I know you've been working long hours at that social services job." That social services job. My mother's tone suggested she still considered my career choice a form of extended adolescent rebellion, something I would eventually outgrow in favor of more respectable work that reflected better on the family name. "I'm fine," I lied, because telling the truth would have required explaining that I was suffering from chronic anxiety related to covering up my sister's hit-and-run accident, and that conversation would have ended with my mother suggesting therapy, and my father wondering aloud what they had done wrong to produce such a disturbed daughter. But I wasn't fine. I was breaking apart piece by piece, eroded by the constant pressure of maintaining normal family relationships, while knowing that our entire dynamic was built on ignorance and denial. The final crack in my composure came 3 days before the party, when I received a newsletter update from Tommy Martinez's ongoing medical fund. His mother had written about Tommy's latest surgery, a procedure to address complications from his original injuries that had developed over the past 3 years. The surgery was successful, but it would require months of additional physical therapy that insurance wouldn't fully cover. "Tommy continues to inspire us with his determination," his mother had written. "Even on his hardest days, he talks about wanting to help other kids who have been through trauma. He started volunteering with a support group for young accident victims, sharing his story to help them feel less alone." Tommy was helping other trauma victims. The child whose life had been destroyed by my sister's cowardice and selfishness was using his experience to support other children who were suffering. Meanwhile, Sophia was being celebrated for her volunteer work with underprivileged youth, a cruel irony that made me physically ill. That night, I called in sick to work and spent the day in bed, paralyzed by the weight of carrying a secret that was destroying my ability to function as a healthy human being. I couldn't eat, couldn't concentrate, couldn't maintain the pretense of normalcy that family relationships required. I found myself imagining different scenarios. What if I had spoken up 3 years ago when I first discovered what Sophia had done? What if I had insisted she turn herself in, or threatened to report her myself if she didn't take responsibility for her actions? What if I had chosen Tommy's well-being over protecting my family's feelings? But those were hypotheticals, and hypotheticals don't heal spinal cord injuries or pay medical bills or give parents back the athletic, carefree child they had lost to someone else's criminal negligence. The morning of Sophia's birthday party, I woke up with perfect clarity about what I was going to do. I was done being the family protector, the keeper of secrets that served no one except the person who least deserved protection. I was done watching injustice masquerade as success while a genuinely heroic child struggled in silence. As I dressed for the party in my black cocktail dress, chosen unconsciously but appropriately for what was essentially going to be a funeral, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Relief. Tonight, the lies would end. The silence that followed my words stretched like a taut wire about to snap. Around the table, 20 faces stared at me with expressions ranging from confusion to horror to disbelief. Uncle Robert had gone pale, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. Grandmother Harrison was clutching her pearls with shaking hands. My cousin Jennifer looked like she was about to be sick, but it was my parents' faces that held my attention. My father's confident smile had crumbled into something unrecognizable, his eyes wide with shock and dawning comprehension. My mother had dropped her champagne flute, and the sound of crystal shattering on the hardwood floor punctuated my revelation like an exclamation point. "Avery," my father said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What are you talking about?" I looked directly at Sophia, who sat frozen in her emerald dress like a beautiful statue carved from guilt and secrets. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide the terror in her eyes or the way her hands had begun to tremble against the white tablecloth. "Tell them, Sophia," I said quietly. "Tell them about Tommy Martinez." "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, but her voice cracked on the lie. "March 15th, 3 years ago," I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. "You were driving home from Jennifer Chen's party. You'd been drinking, again, and using cocaine to get through finals week. You were texting someone while driving through the Riverside neighborhood." "Stop," Sophia said, her voice breaking. "Please, Avery, stop." But I couldn't stop. 3 years of carrying this secret alone had built to this moment, and now that I had started speaking the truth, it poured out of me like water through a broken dam. Tommy was riding his bike home from his friend's house. It was 9:30 at night, and he was being careful, wearing his helmet and reflective gear like his parents taught him. But you hit him anyway, because you were too impaired and distracted to see a child following traffic laws. "Oh my God," my mother breathed, her hand pressed to her mouth. "The impact threw Tommy 30 feet, I continued, pulling out my phone to show the photos I had saved from his family's fundraising page. "He suffered a complete spinal cord injury at the T12 level. He was in the hospital for 4 months. He'll never walk again." I swiped to the next photo. Tommy in his wheelchair, participating in a charity race with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "His family has spent over $200,000 on medical bills and modifications to make their house accessible. His father lost his job because he couldn't work full-time while caring for his son. They've had to move twice because they couldn't afford their mortgage." Around the table, people were starting to cry. Aunt Margaret was sobbing openly, while Uncle Charles looked like he was about to stand up and leave. My grandmother had gone completely white, staring at Sophia as if she was seeing her for the first time. "But the worst part," I said, looking directly at my parents, "isn't just that Sophia hit him. It's that she drove away. She left a 12-year-old boy bleeding and broken in the street and came home to this house. Do you remember what happened the next morning?" My father shook his head mutely, but I could see recognition dawning in his eyes. "Sophia came downstairs for breakfast and you congratulated her on making law review. She accepted your praise and your pride while Tommy Martinez was fighting for his life in the intensive care unit, and she never said a word." "I wanted to," Sophia said suddenly, her voice barely audible. "I wanted to tell you. I wanted to go back, but I was scared. And then time passed and it became impossible." "Nothing was impossible except your conscience," I said. "While you were celebrating your law school achievements, Tommy was learning to use a catheter. While you were being interviewed for summer internships, he was struggling through physical therapy. While our parents were bragging about your job offer at Whitmore & Associates, his parents were setting up a GoFundMe page to pay for his medical expenses." I stood up and walked to where Sophia sat frozen in her chair. "You want to know why I know all of this?" I asked her. "Because I've been donating to Tommy's medical fund for 3 years. I've been following his recovery, his setbacks, his small victories. I've been watching a genuinely heroic child rebuild his life while you've been accepting praise for achievements that mean nothing compared to his courage." "Avery," my father started to say. No, I interrupted, turning to face him. You don't get to speak yet. You just toasted your only real daughter, the daughter who left a child paralyzed and never looked back. So tell me, Dad, who's your real daughter now? The aftermath of my revelation unfolded like a controlled demolition. Everything that had seemed solid and permanent about our family structure collapsed in slow motion, revealing the hollow spaces and rotten foundations that had been hidden beneath our carefully maintained facade. Sophia broke first. The perfect composure she had maintained for 25 years shattered completely as she doubled over in her chair, sobbing with the raw, desperate sound of someone who had finally reached the end of their ability to pretend. The emerald dress that had made her look like a princess now seemed to emphasize how small and broken she appeared, crumpled in on herself like a discarded doll. I'm sorry, she kept repeating through her tears. I'm so sorry. I wanted to stop. I wanted to help him, but I was so scared, and I didn't know what to do, and then it was too late. It's never too late to do the right thing, I said, surprised by the gentleness in my own voice. Seeing Sophia's facade crumble didn't bring me the satisfaction I had expected. Instead, I felt hollow, drained by the weight of finally speaking truth that had poisoned our family for years. My mother stood up abruptly, her face white with shock, and something that might have been disgust. I need to leave, she said, her voice barely controlled. I can't look at you right now. She directed this last statement at Sophia, not at me, and I saw my sister flinch as if she had been physically struck. Margaret, my father said, reaching for my mother's hand. Don't touch me, she snapped, jerking away from him. Don't touch me while you're trying to process this. Our daughter is a criminal. She destroyed a family and let us celebrate her success for 3 years while that child suffered. She looked around the table at our relatives, who were sitting in stunned silence like witnesses to a catastrophic accident. I'm going to my sister's house, she announced. I can't be here right now. I can't pretend this is something we can just talk through over dessert. After she left, the silence was even more profound. My father sat staring at Sophia with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger, exactly, but a kind of bewildered devastation, as if he was trying to reconcile the daughter he thought he knew with the person I had just revealed her to be. Is it true? He asked finally, his voice sounding older than I had ever heard it. All of it? Sophia nodded without looking up, her tears falling onto the white tablecloth like rain on snow. The drugs? He continued. Another nod. The hit and run? A whispered yes that barely qualified a sound. 3 years, he said, more to himself than to anyone else. 3 years of celebrating your success while a family. He couldn't finish the sentence. I watched my father, the man who had always been so certain about right and wrong, so confident in his moral superiority, struggle to understand that he had been proud of someone whose achievements were built on the foundation of an unthinkable betrayal. One by one, our relatives began to leave. Some offered awkward goodbyes, unsure whether they should acknowledge what they had witnessed or pretend it hadn't happened. Others simply slipped out quietly, probably grateful to escape the wreckage of what had begun as a birthday celebration. Uncle Robert paused at the door. David, he said to my father, if you need anything, legal advice, someone to talk to, you know where to find me. Legal advice. The reality of what Sophia faced was beginning to sink in for all of us. This wasn't just a family scandal that could be managed with apologies and therapy. This was a criminal matter that would have real consequences. After the last guest left, the 3 of us sat in the dining room surrounded by the remnants of the party. Abandoned champagne glasses, untouched birthday cake, wilted flowers that had been arranged to celebrate someone who no longer existed in the way we had known her. What happens now? My father asked, looking at me as if I had become the adult in the room and he was the confused child. Now Sophia has to decide whether she's going to turn herself in or wait for the truth to come out another way, I said. Because it will come out. These things always do. I'll turn myself in, Sophia said quietly, her voice hoarse from crying. I should have done it 3 years ago. I should have stopped to help Tommy. I should have called 911. I should have been a human being instead of a coward. It was the first completely honest thing I had heard my sister say in years. But as we sat in the wreckage of our family's former happiness, I realized that confession was only the beginning of a reckoning that would reshape all our lives in ways we couldn't yet imagine. The next morning brought harsh sunlight and the immediate disorienting reality that our family as we had known it no longer existed. I woke up in my childhood bedroom to the sound of my father on the phone downstairs, his voice carrying the weight of decisions no parent should have to make. "Yes, I understand the implications," he was saying. "We need the best criminal defense attorney you can recommend. Money isn't an issue. My daughter's future is at stake. My daughter's future." Even in crisis, even knowing what Sophia had done, he was still trying to protect her. I felt a complicated mixture of anger and admiration for his loyalty, even as I wondered if he would have moved heaven and earth to protect me if our positions had been reversed. When I came downstairs, I found Sophia sitting at the kitchen table still wearing her emerald dress from the night before, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. She looked like she had aged a decade overnight, her perfect makeup smeared, her hair disheveled, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "I called the police," she said without looking up. "They're sending someone over this afternoon to take my statement." My father looked up from his phone call. "Sophia, we should wait for the lawyer." "No," she said firmly. "I've waited long enough. Tommy Martinez has been waiting 3 years for justice. I won't make him wait another day while we figure out how to minimize the damage to my reputation." It was perhaps the most mature thing I had ever heard Sophia say. But maturity at 25, after destroying a child's life, felt like too little, too late. The detective who arrived that afternoon was a woman named Sarah Chen, probably in her 40s, with kind eyes and the weary demeanor of someone who had seen too many families destroyed by preventable tragedies. She listened to Sophia's confession with professional detachment, taking notes and asking clarifying questions that made it clear this was routine for her, even if it was cataclysmic for us. "Miss Harrison," Detective Chen said after Sophia finished her statement, "you understand that you're confessing to leaving the scene of an accident involving serious bodily injury, which is a felony in this state?" "I understand," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the tears that continued to fall. "I also understand that I should have done this 3 years ago." The detective's expression softened slightly. "The Martinez family has never stopped hoping that the person who hit their son would come forward. Your confession will mean something to them, even if it can't undo the damage." After Detective Chen left with Sophia's signed confession and arrangements for her formal arrest the following day, we sat in the kitchen trying to process what had just happened. My father kept checking his phone, presumably coordinating with lawyers and trying to manage the crisis. But there was no managing this. There was only facing the consequences. "Avery," Sophia said suddenly, "why did you keep the secret for 3 years?" The question caught me off guard. I had been expecting anger, recriminations, blame for destroying her life by revealing what she had done. I hadn't expected self-reflection. "I thought I was protecting the family," I said honestly. "I thought if people knew the truth, it would destroy Mom and Dad. I thought it would hurt too many people. But it was hurting you," she observed. "Carrying that secret. I could see it sometimes. The way you looked at me during family dinners. I knew you knew something, but I told myself it couldn't be that important. Important. A child's broken spine wasn't important enough to address if it meant inconveniencing the golden daughter's perfect life. I also thought," I continued, "that maybe you would eventually do the right thing on your own, that your conscience would win out over your self-interest. But it didn't," Sophia said. "My conscience lost to my cowardice every single day for 3 years. The honesty was startling. This vulnerable, self-aware woman bore no resemblance to the perfect daughter who had accepted our parents' adoration while hiding her criminal behavior. "What will happen to me?" she asked, not in a self-pitying way, but as if she genuinely wanted to understand the consequences she would face. "Probably prison," I said gently. "Definitely the end of your legal career. Public humiliation. The destruction of everything you've built your identity around." She nodded as if she had expected this answer. "Do you think Tommy will be able to forgive me?" she asked. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I think he deserves the chance to decide for himself. He deserves to know that you're taking responsibility, even if it's 3 years too late." That evening, our mother returned home to find Sophia packing for what would likely be her last night of freedom before formal arrest proceedings began. The conversation between them was brief and devastating. "I don't know how to love someone who would do what you did," our mother said, standing in the doorway of Sophia's childhood room. "Then don't," Sophia replied simply. "Love Avery instead. She's the daughter who deserves it." It was the first time anyone in our family had acknowledged that their love had always been conditional, and that I had never been the child who met those conditions. 6 months later, I sat in the courthouse waiting area outside the sentencing hearing, watching Tommy Martinez navigate his wheelchair, with the easy competence of someone who had long since adapted to a reality that should never have been forced upon him. At 15, he looked older than his years, but retained the bright, determined expression that had characterized him in the photos from before the accident. Sophia had pled guilty to leaving the scene of an accident involving serious bodily injury, DUI, and several drug-related charges that had emerged during the investigation. Her sentencing today would determine whether she served 2 years or 5 years in prison, though her legal career was over regardless of the outcome. Avery Harrison? A woman approached me, mid-40s with Tommy's same dark eyes and determined chin. I'm Maria Martinez, Tommy's mother. I stood up, unsure of what to expect from this meeting. Mrs. Martinez, I wanted to apologize for my family, for what my sister did, for how long it took. She held up her hand to stop me. You don't need to apologize for someone else's actions. Detective Chen told us that you were the one who convinced your sister to confess. That took courage. It took 3 years too long, I said. Yes, she agreed simply. But it still took courage. Tommy wheeled over to join us, and I was struck by the composure in his young face. This was the child whose life had been shattered by my sister's selfishness, yet he seemed more mature and centered than Sophia had ever been. Are you the sister who sent the donations? He asked directly. I nodded, suddenly embarrassed by the inadequacy of my anonymous contributions. Thank you, he said. The money helped, but more than that, it helped to know that someone cared about what happened to me, even when we didn't know who it was. I began crying then, overwhelmed by the grace of this child who had every reason to hate my family, but instead was thanking me for doing far less than justice required. Tommy has something he wants to say to your sister, Mrs. Martinez said gently. If that's okay with you? When Sophia emerged from the courtroom an hour later, sentenced to 3 years in prison with eligibility for parole in 18 months, she looked smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. The confident woman who had once commanded every room she entered was gone, replaced by someone who moved through the world with the uncertain steps of someone still learning how to carry the weight of consequences. But when she saw Tommy waiting for her, she stopped completely. I'm sorry, she said, the words seeming inadequate, even as they hung in the air between them. I know that doesn't begin to make up for what I did, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. Tommy studied her face for a long moment. I'm glad you finally came forward, he said. Not because I wanted you to go to prison, but because I needed to know that what happened to me mattered to someone besides my family. It matters, Sophia said, tears falling down her cheeks. You matter. Your life, your dreams, everything I took from you. It all matters. I didn't lose everything, Tommy said with quiet strength. I lost some things, and I'll always be angry about that. But I learned things too, about courage, about what really matters, about how to help other people who are going through trauma. He looked directly at Sophia. I work with other kids who've been hurt in accidents now. I help them understand that their lives aren't over, just different. Maybe someday, when you get out of prison, you could help me with that work. The offer of redemption was so unexpected, so generous, that even the courthouse waiting area seemed to hold its breath. I would be honored, Sophia whispered. Later, as we watched Sophia being led away in handcuffs to begin her prison sentence, my parents stood beside me looking like people who were still learning how to inhabit their new reality. The perfect daughter was gone, the family's reputation was destroyed, and the child they had spent my entire life overlooking was now the one they turned to for guidance. I owe you an apology, my father said as we walked to the parking garage. About the only real daughter comment, about everything. We were wrong, Avery. About Sophia. About you. About what really matters. You weren't wrong about loving Sophia, I said. You were wrong about why you loved her. You loved her for her achievements instead of for who she was as a person. And we didn't love you enough for who you are, my mother added, speaking for the first time since the sentencing. That was our failure, not yours. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement, and that was enough for now. Tommy Martinez had lost the use of his legs, but gained a deeper understanding of resilience and purpose. Sophia had lost her freedom and her career, but finally gained the honesty that had eluded her for 25 years. My parents had lost their perfect daughter, but gained the opportunity to love their actual daughters for who they really were, and I had lost the burden of carrying someone else's secret. Finally free to build relationships based on truth, rather than the exhausting performance of protecting everyone from reality. Sometimes the most devastating revelations create space for the most necessary healing.